for melodic heavy metal. Playing it heavier, louder, raunchier, faster. This is the Signals of Intuition.
That's brand new Tokyo Motor Fist right there, the opening track from their new album, Lion. That song was Youngblood. You're listening to the Signals of Intuition, your home for melodic hard rock and heavy metal. And tonight on the show, we've got the guitar player of that band, Mr. Steve Brown, who is also the main guitar player and songwriter for Trixter. He also plays with Def Leppard, Dennis DeYoung, Rubik's Cube, a TSO tribute band called Wizards in Winter, and he's involved with a number of other bands and projects as well. Tokyo Motor Fist are a supergroup featuring Ted Poley of Danger Danger on vocals, Steve Brown on guitar, Chuck Berge of Rainbow, Billy Joel, and personally one of my favorite bands, Red Dawn from the early 90s. And in that band, he also played with the bass player of Tokyo Motor Fist, Greg Smith, who's also played with Alice Cooper, Ted Nugent, and many others throughout the years. So without further ado, let's get Steve on the line.
Brandon.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
It's going great, man. It's going great.
Perfect. All right, well, when I do these, I always like to start at the beginning of you as a musician and then work our way up to the new record, the new Tokyo Motor Fist. So starting from the beginning, where did you grow up and how did you get started in music?
Well, I grew up in a town called Paramus, New Jersey, Bergen County, New Jersey, and I started playing music when I was 8 years old in 1978. And there were two bands that got me off and running, if you will, and that would be Kiss and Van Halen. I discovered Kiss Rock and Roll Over, and my sister-in-law now, when she was my brother's girlfriend, I was over her house, and I saw the album cover in her brother's room, and I saw it on the floor. And I picked it up, and it was like, I couldn't even talk. I just said, "What is this?" And her brother, Paulie, I remember he said to me, "Take it home and listen to it. I think you're going to like it." And I remember listening, putting the needle on, Rock and Roll Over, and the first song was I Want You. And I hear the acoustic guitars, and I'm going, "Oh, this is nice. This sounds cool." And then all of a sudden, when the drums and the guitars, I want you, Paul Stanley comes in with that voice. It was one of those moments where, you know, it was like Marty McFly in Back to the Future when he plugs in his guitar and the speaker, he plugs it in, hits that chord, and gets blown across the room. That's what happened to me. And it was immediate. And it was just, and I kept listening, hearing Dr. Love and then hearing Mr. Speed, all those great songs off, you know, still to this day, Rock and Roll Over is probably my favorite Kiss record. And it just blew me away. And then a couple months later, I was walking down the street and one of my neighbors knew that I was into Kiss at this point. He said, "Steve, you got to come here. You got to listen to this." And he brought me into his house and he had an 8-track player, and he played. He said, "You got to listen to this band. It's called Van Halen." I go, "What? What is that?" And he played it, and Running with the Devil kicks in, and I heard that. And then the next thing I know, I hear, you know, the beginning of Eruption, and I heard this guitar playing. And I couldn't even understand if it was guitar or if it was like a video game or a keyboard. It just sounded like something out of this world. He told me it's this guy, Eddie Van Halen. He's the guitar player. And from that moment on, those two bands changed my life forever, because I think it was within a couple weeks or about a month or two, I told my mother, I said, "Mom, I want to take guitar lessons." She took me down a local music store, Musically Yours in Maywood, New Jersey, and I started taking guitar lessons, and I haven't looked back since.
It's hilarious because I have a very, very similar story with Kiss. I'm a guitar player myself, and that was the first band that like really hooked me and wanting to do it. And it was, for me, it was Detroit Rock City, being that I'm from right next to Detroit. But it's funny, I didn't even know the song was called Detroit Rock City. So what's that Get Up song? That's so cool. I think that band, for so many people, just made everybody want to play guitar.
Oh, sure, of course. I mean, it's just one of those things that I guess you're around my age. I'm going to be 50 in 2 weeks. So we grew up, but what I tell people, growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was the greatest time for rock and roll, greatest time to grow up. And it was just, still near and dear to my heart. And, but again, those moments are moments in your life that you never forget. And I still remember, again, that story of dropping the needle down and hearing I Want You. I tell the story often. And then again, the same thing with Van Halen. And then, fast forward for me 20 years after that fact that I get to meet Eddie Van Halen and become friends with him. I've been up to his house and I'm still friends with him to this day. And then 1992, Trixter got to open for Kiss on the Revenge tour. So it's like one of those things where, as a little kid, you just go, wow, and you never know what life is going to bring you. And for me, again, I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world that every dream I ever had came true 100 times over.
Sure. Well, so take me let's step back just a bit. So you start taking guitar lessons. When do you start playing in bands? How old are you? Is Trixter your first band, or did you start jamming with other people? It was, really?
Yeah, Trixter. I started Trixter in 1983. I was 12 years old. Before that, after playing guitar for like 3 or 4 years, I was already writing songs. I was already practicing guitar for hours a day. I probably had 10,000 hours in by the time I was 15. So I was around 11 or 12. There were a couple guys in the neighborhood that I was jamming with, doing stuff. And it was right after I saw Van Halen. I saw Van Halen live. So my two favorite bands and my two first concerts. My first concert was Kiss on the Dynasty Tour at Madison Square Garden, 1979. And then my second concert was Van Halen at Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1982 on the Diver Down Tour. And right after I saw Van Halen on that tour, I knew that there was no time to waste. Because Van Halen, as much as I loved Kiss, they were like, that was not attainable for me. Van Halen was the band that I saw, and the party atmosphere of the show and how loose they were, but yet the musicianship between Edward and Alex were just unbelievable. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in a band that brought that party vibe and yet still had musicianship and had great songs. And so that's all I ever tried to do with Trixter. And so, it was Van Halen. And then the other band was, no surprise, Def Leppard, because I got into Def Leppard probably around 1980, 1981 with On Through the Night. And I remember reading about them and reading that Rick Allen was 15 years old when they got signed. So that was a big influence to me because I didn't know. I thought there was like, you had to be at least 18 to get, to start a band. And it was like, holy shit, this kid's a teenager like me. Or, I was a little younger, but it gave me the incentive. I said, shit, if Def Leppard can do it, I could do it. So blindly, I started Trixter. We were really rough around the edges. Pete Lauren, the singer at the time in Trixter, he wasn't even a singer. He was a friend of mine, and I knew him for another mutual friend, but I knew that he was the best looking kid in town. And I said, if I can teach that guy how to sing, I know that we're going to have a band. It was kind of like the story about Motley Crue when they saw Vince Neil. He wasn't the greatest singer, but the way that guy looked and the way that guy got chicks to go crazy, you knew that you had a lead singer there, And then look, when we all know David Lee Roth wasn't the greatest singer in the world, and look where it got him, you know what I mean? So that was it, man. So I started Trixter in the summer of 1983, and by the summer of 1984, July of 1984, we played our first gig in my town of Paramus, New Jersey, at the local band shell. I guess what we say, the rest is history.
Of course. So I know, Danger from the same area, and you play with them. Did you know them from back in the day?
Well, I knew Ted Poley, my singer in Tokyo Motor Fist. I've known Ted since I was probably 14 years old. Ted grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey. He grew up in a town called Ramsey, New Jersey, which was a couple towns over from Paramus. And Chuck Berge, our drummer, grew up in Montclair, New Jersey. So, there's a whole closeness of us, and the reason why getting into Tokyo Motor Fist, why we all get along, why it is a real band. This isn't one Frontier's fake studio concoction, thrown together cash grab band. This is a real band. because we all grew up together. So yeah, I had known Ted when Ted was the drummer and singer in a band, in a great New Jersey band called Prophet.
Oh, that's hilarious. I interviewed Snake and he talked about seeing Prophet.
Yeah.
That whole scene is just hilarious. You know, like all these metal hard rock bands from that era around New York, New Jersey, like it's just crazy the connections that everybody had to each other.
Oh, well, that's, and that's the great thing. And I talk about this a lot. I just got done doing filming a couple months ago. I filmed a documentary. There's a documentary coming out and probably next year on the New Jersey music scene called The New Jersey Sound. And what I found from being touring all around the world, the one thing I can honestly say, the Jersey music scene, and Bon Jovi came up with this title for the Bon Jovi Skid Row tour in 1989 when Bon Jovi was out on the New Jersey tour, and they called it the Brotherhood Tour. And I got to tell you, man, that holds true for all the bands on the New Jersey scene. There is a brotherhood that we all have, even bands that are different styles of music. I'm really good friends with Dennis Dykin, who's the drummer for the Smithereens, another great, fabulous New Jersey band. But they weren't part of the whole hard rock scene, but yet we're all friends and fans of each other because Jersey, there's very much that working class, of course, Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, that feeling of, yeah, man, we're going to get in, we're going to work, we're going to be better than everybody else, and we're also going to help each other out. And, John Bon Jovi was the first guy who helped me out back in the day, helped Trixter out. He gave us our first little break. He was the one who introduced us to the Skid Row guys, and Snake and Rachel and Scotty were big influences on us. Hooked us up with their same lawyer back in the day. And we're lifelong friends because of it. So, the New Jersey scene, and with the guys in Prophet, Dean Fasano, who was the singer of Prophet, went on to help Trixter, and we co-wrote songs with him, and he worked with my singer, Pete Lauren, on the second Trixter record. So there is, like I said, there is this New Jersey thing that with all the bands, we're sort of connected to each other in a way because we hold our band brothers, we keep each other close and we watch out for each other. Much different than LA, because when we went out to LA to record the first Trixter record, I saw how cutthroat those guys were. And you saw the thing walking up, Sunset Strip, and you see a band put up their flyers. 2 minutes later, you see another band come rip their flyers down and put their posters up right above it. That would never happen in New Jersey. We never did that. All we did was try to make the show bigger and make everybody try to be successful. Because the more bands out of Jersey that became successful, the more successful we'd all be. And, that kind of rang true.
It's funny you mentioned Skid Row, and I think it was 2012 on New Audio Machine, you guys did Walk with a Stranger. And it's hilarious because my own band in 2010, we were going to record that cover, but we were in such a time crunch, and we for everyone to properly learn the song, because there's not proper versions of it out, right? There's kind of sort of like bad sounding demos off a cassette that was degrading. At least that's what I have that's on the internet. But so years I've wanted to cover that, and we're like, let's do it. And we just were under such a time crunch, we couldn't do it. And we're like, well, we don't know who owns the copyright and blah, blah, blah. So we just said, forget it. And sure enough, 2 years later, you guys did a cover of the tune.
Well, and what's interesting about that is, it's funny, man. We actually started doing that song back in 1988, 89, right when, I'd known Snake and Rachel in 1986. I met those guys. And that song, when they, Trixter played gigs with Skid Row before they had Sebastian in the band. We played gigs with them with the original singer, Matt Fallon.
Oh, so it goes way, way back. Wow.
Oh yeah. We were, that's how deep we go, man. We're friends with John Bon Jovi before Slippery When Wet took off. So, that's how deep that goes. But Walk with a Stranger, I always loved that song. There was something about it. I still I don't understand why they never cut it, because I think that song would have been phenomenal on the first record, but they didn't do it. It was definitely a little too pop. I think Trixter definitely fit Trixter a little bit better. But as soon as I knew that they weren't going to cut it, I said to Snake and Rachel, I said, hey, man, can we use that song? And they were like, sure, man. And the version that you have that's on the internet is the same version I have, because they never did a full proper like demo of that song or a real recording of it, which kind of sucks. But it's a great song, and we demoed it. We did sort of a shitty demo for the first album, and our producer, Bill Ray, was like, nah, fuck that. We're not doing a song. I don't want you doing a song that you didn't write, Steve. You know, let Skid Row have their thing. But so when it came time to do a New Audio Machine, you know, I was like, man, we gotta resurrect Walk With a Stranger. And of course, we dropped the key down to make it, because, you know, the original key of that song, it was in A, and it was like the singing for that was just through the roof. So I was like, it's just not going to sound as cool. So I dropped the key down to E and made it much more manageable on the vocal range. And it sounds awesome. I remember when I sent it to Snake and Rachel, they both said, wow, I finally like that song now. I guess that was the seal of approval from the guys who wrote the song.
That's great. No, it's funny because I asked Snake that as well. I said, like, are you guys ever going to cut this song? He says, no, it's just, you know, we did that when we were 18. We're good with it. I think when I interviewed him, I don't know if you guys had covered it yet by that point or what the case is, but no, that's so funny. Okay, so tell me, actually, I was looking this up. I didn't know you guys had sort of a first album before your first album called, is it Just Having Fun? Is that the name of it? In like 88?
Yeah, but it's not. No, that was Just Having Fun, bro. We didn't have a record, and I've heard this before, and I kind of go, what? It was just a demo tape that we sold. You know, it was our first recording. There have been people, and there's definitely some bootlegs that have been out there. For all I know, there is somebody selling it and marketing it as our first album. But no, nothing official. Anything we had out was that first demo tape, which was Just Having Fun, which at the moment I have the master 8-track analog tapes, and I'm transferring that stuff. So that stuff is going to get an official release, because we have, you know, 8-track analog tape material from 1986 through 1989, with the end of it, which is the demo of On and On, which was on the first Trixter album. So we definitely, and a couple songs that didn't make the record that, you know, I listened to it. I'm like, holy shit, this sounds great. So at some point, probably within the next 5 years, you're going to see like an 80s, you know, made in the 80s Trixter record coming out at some point.
Oh, that's great. Are you going to like remix it and sort of touch it up, or are you going to leave it as it was?
I'm going to do probably both. I've been PJ and I were talking about this. We're probably going to do like a raw and a polished version. You know, because I definitely, you know, being a producer, engineer, I want to kind of make it listenable for people and, you know, give the songs their due, if you will, without completely re-recording the stuff. Because as you know, on New Audio Machine and Human Era, we brought back some of the songs from back in 1987 and 1988, songs that didn't make the first record. Rockin' to the Edge of the Night was one of them, and also Physical Attraction. Those were songs that didn't make the first two Trixter records, and we brought them back, changed it up a little bit, made them a little bit, dropped the keys down again to make them a little bit easier to sing and more pleasing on the ears. You know, there's definitely some songs. So I think that's what we're going to do. You know, we have, you know, right now with this whole pandemic, I've been preserving the Trixter history and my Steve Brown history, if you will, transferring all of my old demo tapes, everything from 1985. I have 4-track stuff that I'm transferring over. So all I can say is within the next 10 years, all of the fans of Steve Brown and Trixter and all of my bands, you're going to be seeing, I transferred all of my 8mm videotapes. I got everything transformed, awesome, professionally done. So there's going to be documentaries. There's going to be stuff released. So that's all I can say is a lot of history. You know, if there's any good that comes out of this pandemic, is that there's going to be a lot of new music and video stuff from me, and I'm really excited about that.
Perfect. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that. Like I said, I discovered this last night doing the research, because I know your guys' other stuff, but, you know, until you actually dig deeper and go, oh, wow, there's another demo before this, so that will be very cool to check out in the future. Okay, tell me on the first record, how is it working with Jim and Bill Ray? I mean, you know, typically you think of, you know, like Bob Clearmountain or sort of one of those guys, the Bob Rocks and stuff of the world. And I mean, those two are known more as like songwriters. How was it working with those two as your first producers on that record?
It was fantastic. I mean, that was us going to rock and roll high school, rock and roll college, and learning how to make a record 101. And I got to tell you, the whole Trixter phenomenon and the success of it and the career, we were a lot like the Bad News Bears, because we didn't have, growing up, I didn't have like Snake and Rachel had John Bon Jovi. I didn't have that. You know what I mean? I didn't have a guy who was telling them, giving them, solid advice. I was getting it kind of secondhand, from Snake and Rachel or from other guys. My first producer, this guy, John Chrissy, who produced our old demo tapes, but he didn't really have the experience. So you got to understand, man, we didn't learn about a lot of things about making records until we got out to LA and we got into Sound City, the great, fabulous classic recording studio, legendary studio.
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of the tape rolled. So between Jim and Bill Ray, who, again, they weren't really record producers, but there was something I loved about Bill Ray. He said the right things to me as far as I knew some of my songs needed help, and I was open to doing anything to become successful. So it meant, and at the time, that was when, there was the Desmond Childs, there was, Mutt Lange, of course, all the song doctors that all the bands were using. I had a good friend of mine, Jack Ponte, who worked with Bon Jovi and produced Cooper. Yeah. He's still to this day, one of my dearest friends and a huge influence on me. So I was working as the main songwriter in Trixter. I was getting sent around to work with all these different songwriters. I worked with the guy Mick Smiley, who co-wrote Kiss Me Deadly with Lita Ford. So Bill Ray was one of those things, because we met with some other famous producers, talked to some different guys. But between Mechanic Records, Mechanic MCA, Steve Sinclair, the president, they were kind of like an offshoot of MCA Records, but they were quirky. Bill Ray and Jim Ray and his team, it was unique. So I say it with all my heart. We were like the Bad News Bears in the sense. We were really rough around the edges. And we needed somebody like Bill who was kind of going to be able to really help Pete with his singing, because Pete was not a natural born singer. When I formed Trixter, he wasn't even a singer. I made him a singer. Pete was the best looking guy in town. And I'm like, if I could get that guy to grow his hair long and sing, he could be the next Bon Jovi and the next David Lee Roth, the next Vince Neil. And it's very much like the way, Mick and I think either Tommy and Nikki talk about, or Mick and Nikki, when first time they went to see Vince Neil sing, they were like, he's not the greatest singer, but the way that guy shakes his hips and the chicks go crazy for him, that's the guy we need in the band. So that's how that was. Working with Bill and Jim was making record. We went to school, and it was tough, man. It was 10, 12-hour days of rehearsing and rewriting songs. And it was the first time I learned that someone ever told me, when you play guitar solos, every lick and every note, everything's got to be in time. I just pretty much played by feel at that point. I didn't understand about click tracks, and I didn't understand about how you got to make your guitar solos. You got to make every lick, whether it's the slow licks or the fast ones, they all got to be in time, and about phrasing. So this was all overwhelming, and then throw into the mix that we're paying $1,000 a day for recording studios. So it was a lot of pressure, but Bill and Jim Ray, they were unbelievable teachers. And the lessons that they taught me in making records are lessons that I still use to this day. And look, I wouldn't be here talking to you, I don't think, right now if it wasn't for them, because they, really did so much for us as a band. And for me personally, more than anything, because they were taking my songs that I had written and wanting to change things, as they say, like cutting and maiming your children and, changing things. And luckily, most of the changes they made were for the right. 1 in a Million was a very basic song in its original infancy. In the song that I wrote, it's the same chorus, the same pre-chorus, same verse. The 90% of the song is there, but the changes they made some melodic changes, and musically Jim Ray him and I came up with that Photograph like intro, and that's what makes this, that's what sets the song up, those little changes. And luckily I wasn't an old jaded songwriter who all I cared about was my publishing share. I was like, yeah man, let's do it. And I gave Jim Ray and Bill Ray credits on songs for minor changes, but I felt they deserved it. And then on the other side of that, working with them with songwriting, Give It To Me Good was one that I said, this song doesn't need anything. I think it's perfect the way it is. And if you listen to my original demo of Give It To Me Good, which is out there somewhere, it's pretty much the same as what's on the record. And I was right about that. And Bill Ray and Jim Ray, they said the same thing. They're like, yeah, man, this is great the way it is. Let's leave it. And that's pretty much what they did. And so I thank them for that. But there's some other songs. You'll Never See Me Crying was a song that was on the older demos. I think the old way we did it was better than what happened on the record. Some things just didn't make the cut, but whatever, man. The record's going on, around the world. It's over 2 million in sales. I can't complain. It was a success, man,
Yep, exactly. Another thing, I had no idea who played on this track. For If Looks Could Kill, that soundtrack, you guys did the song One Mo' Time, and I knew the song, but I didn't know that was Edgar Winter playing on the track. How did you get hooked up with him to play on that?
Oh, that's a great story. So that was one when we were out on the road. We get a call from our managers. MCA wants you to do a song for this movie they're doing the soundtrack for. You got to write something. And I'm like, we're out on tour. I don't have my recording studio. I can't write none. I'm like, why don't we use One More Time? Because before we went out on tour, I recorded that demo, and my publisher was going to shop it for me to try. I wanted to try to get somebody like Bonnie Raitt to cover it, or some like blues rocker like Jeff Healey or something, because that was big at the time. And so they were like, oh, that's a great idea. We went out, we had a break in like December. We went out to LA to cut it, and our drummer couldn't make it for some reason. So on drums, the other cool thing about that song, that's Tony Thompson from Power Station and from Chic playing drums on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's another tidbit. So how it happened was my good friend Billy Trudell, who is one of the guys who did a lot of the background vocals with me on the first and second Trixter records. Billy Trudell is a great singer. He was in this early 90s band called War Pipes with Elton John's backing band. Phenomenal singer. And him and David Glenn Isley from Jafria sang a lot of back vocals on the first two Trixter records, along with Bobby Kimball from Toto.
Oh, that's crazy. It's funny because half of those I didn't realize played on the first record.
Yeah.
For me, my brain instantly jumps to producer and recording. That's my world, right? So definitely skip those names on that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's awesome, because if you listen to One in a Million, especially the album version, you can hear Bobby Kimball all over that. And we had Bobby sing the outro to One in a Million, and Pete kind of copies his licks, and you could hear some certain things that he's trying to do the Bobby Kimball. And I actually have the cassette of Bobby doing the scats at the end of One in a Million, and he's like doing the stuff that he does at the end of, Hold the Line or Rosanna or Africa, those signature Bobby Kimball, lines. So a lot of cool stuff regarding the whole Trixter record is another scenario. But so when we went in to do If Looks Could Kill, my buddy Billy goes, oh man, I just got done doing a couple things with Edgar Winter. He's such a great guy. And it popped in my head, and I'm like, dude, do you think we could get him to play on this track? And he goes, I think he'd probably love it. Called him up. Next day, he was there, and boom, there he is, Frankenstein, the legend. Edgar Winter walks in the studio, one of the nicest guys to meet. He went in and played that sax solo in one take, and he was out of there within an hour and a half. It was just mind-blowing, and he was such a nice guy. And the only regret I have of that is that I don't think I have a picture with him. It wasn't back then when we were making records, it wasn't like it is now where everybody's got their iPhones and taking pictures. But yeah, so If Looks Could Kill, that's Edgar Winter on saxophone and the late great Tony Thompson on drums. And if you listen to the track, you could totally hear all of Tony Thompson's great signature drum parts as well.
Mm-hmm. No, it's excellent. Excellent. Like, I always dug the tune. Great song. All right, so the next record. So you guys, obviously, you had a lot of success with the first album. I know you went out with Stryper. How was that, by the way? Like, that seems like a completely, like, sound-wise, you guys sound much like Stryper, but I'm guessing a different audience for them?
Yeah, I mean, well, not really. I mean, look, man, Stryper, those guys, Michael Sweet and Oz, those guys are still dear friends of mine. I talk to them all the time. Love those guys. Look, they're a rock and roll band. Whatever their gimmick, every band had their own trip, right? They were the God Rock band, but on that tour, they were against the law. So that's when they weren't doing the whole yellow and black thing. They weren't throwing out the Bibles. They were doing a different thing. They made an awesome record. I love that Against the Law record. But yeah, that was our first tour. And they were fantastic to us. And again, like I said, we're still 30 years later, we're still dear friends. And they have a phenomenal record coming out. So I'm sure you're going to be talking to Michael Sweet soon. But it was great. We had a great tour. And, sadly for them, it was the end of their, first career, if you will, because we were coming up. Our video just got added to MTV. Immediately shot up to number one, and we were the opening act, but we were minor because I remember a big shift once our video got added to MTV, and all of us we'd be come up as the opening act. The place was packed already, and there were nights where we were selling a lot more merchandise than they were. And the same thing happened on the Don Dawkins solo tour that we did right after that. It was the same thing that happened. And it happens with a lot of bands where they blow up and they're opening up. I saw it happen with Bon Jovi. When Slippery When Wet blew up, they were opening up for 38 Special, but they were number one. And it was like, they had the tour book, they had to do it, but they were still an opening act.
Yep. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Record number 2 here. Tell me about this. I'm working with, Queensryche and Rush producer Jimbo Barton. How did he compare to Bill and Jim? I've interviewed Jimbo, and to me, he seems more like of a let the musician do their thing and I'll capture the great sound kind of producer. Would you find him to be that way?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. Jimbo was brought in because at that time I had completely sort of taken over the creative reins and I was co-producing the record. I knew, sadly, that I didn't want to work with Bill and Jim Ray. I wanted to do something else. And I had been what I learned from Jim and Bill Ray, and then I just became obsessed with Mutt Lange and Bruce Fairbairn, all the great producers. And being young and full of energy, I thought I knew it all. So it was about, my goal was, I want somebody who's going to be a great engineer. And Jimbo, don't get me wrong, he came up with some amazing ideas and was an integral part of making that record. And we made a tremendous record. The Here record, it just fell at the worst possible time you could ever release a melodic hard rock record. We were at the height of grunge, but working with him was another incredible learning experience because that was our first time. The first record was recorded all analog, on 2-inch tape. The second record was all digital on the Sony 3348. And then it was the first time we got introduced to using samplers, being able to fly stuff, being able to do, MIDI keyboard stuff. There was a lot of Mutt Lange, Def Leppard stuff going on because Jimbo was very influenced by Mike Shipley and Mutt Lange, as I was. So that was it, man. We were off to the races. And Jimbo was great because I had done so much pre-production with the band. PJ and I, we were doing demos and had most of the songs pretty much written and demoed the way they are on the record. Probably a year before we even started recording. We were doing that stuff out on tour in 1991, demoing. I had a Porta studio. So by the time we started recording that record, we were so rehearsed and polished and ready to go. And we went in and just made a phenomenal record. And, I still listen to that record and just go, damn, if this only came out 2 years earlier.
Sure. I think if it had caught that Queensryche Empire wave, I think it probably would have blown up because it's funny, even though it doesn't quite sound like Queensryche, it definitely has, especially you put Jimbo Barton behind the sounds and it just has that huge, just unbelievable feeling to it,
It does.
And the whole, the album is just, it's very bombastic. Like it's a great driving album. I had it in the car yesterday just to, I haven't listened to it in probably about a year or two. So just to kind of get me up to speed with that again. And I went, wow, it's like album just sounds incredible. It's just a great album to move to.
It is, man. Again, it's one of those things. No matter what happened with it, I'm still so grateful. And making that record, we had just renegotiated with MCA. We got $1 million to make that record, man. If you can believe that, we got a $500,000 signing bonus and a $500,000 recording budget. And I was like, dudes, we're going to do this right. We worked at the best studios money can buy in New York and LA. We worked at Right Track Studios in New York. We worked at Cajun in Pennsylvania, where Queensryche recorded a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Cinderella did. We went out to LA and worked at One on One, where Metallica recorded the Black Album. We worked at the best studios money can buy. We lived in like the best corporate housing. We spent all that money, man. We made that was our Jurassic Park record, but it was one of those things, and I'm so grateful we were able to make that record the way we did, because we got, that's an experience that bands nowadays, most of them are never going to ever experience. Working in world-class old school studios. And, it's funny that we're talking about it, because I just transferred all of my 8mm video from making that record, because in 2022, we're going to have the 30th anniversary of Here. And I'm already starting to put together a documentary on the making the record. And we're going to put out a deluxe edition, remastered, bonus material, different mixes. It's going to be awesome. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that'll be awesome. So I know you guys, for the next record, you ended up doing it yourselves, right? The Undercover album in your home studio.
Yeah, we did at my studio. That was when I bought my house. Luckily the success of Trixter and being a songwriter enabled me to buy a house when I was very young. And my first order of business, instead of buying a Ferrari or buying a Corvette, I built a recording studio. I always wanted to have my version of Eddie Van Halen's 5150. So this was it. I built my own studio in my house. I called it the Mojo Vegas Recording Company, or the Vibe Zone at that time, and AKA 6160. But that was it. Yeah, we recorded the Undercovers record here, and that was just that was the last hurrah. I think we all kind of knew the end was near, and it was just our way. We were like, I didn't have the energy at that point to write a whole nother record of original stuff. So we basically made this covers record, and we said, let's do this and be able to get out on tour. Let's have one good go around. We toured for 8 months on that. And that was kind of the end of it. And then we had to sort of reinvent ourselves after that.
Right. How did you do that record in those days, doing it in a home studio? Was that like DAT or ADAT machines you did that on?
I had the Tascam DA88. So those tapes, digital tapes that you used.
Oh, right on. What are you running nowadays? You probably Pro Tools, I'm guessing, eh?
I am 100% Pro in the box. It's crazy, man. Back then, my studio, I had two 24-space racks filled with TC 2290 Lexicon reverbs, cool compressors, some Summit. Now everything is Slate plugins, Pro Tools, and a lot of the time I'm not even using guitar amps. I'm using my Headrush pedal board or some of the great guitar plugins that they have nowadays. And it's just, technology's unbelievable, man. Great to be able to make records. We recorded some of the new Tokyo Motor Fist record out on tour. Greg and I were out with the Wizards of Winter over the winter, and I had my portable Pro Tools rig. We did some of the bass tracks, and I did some of the guitar tracks out on the road on the tour bus while the bus was driving.
That's amazing. Well, now you can just do dry tracks anyways, right? Like, it's the easiest thing.
Oh, yeah. Especially with the guitars, with the great guitar plugins nowadays that they have. You just record a DI track and you have unlimited options, which that creates its own problems because you start driving yourself nuts, with guitar sound. Oh man, you can't make a decision, and that's the whole thing. Back in the day, making records with the first and second Trixter records, you have to make decisions. Nowadays, with Pro Tools and digital recording, your possibilities are endless, and that creates a whole nother world of problems. But luckily I'm still old school in my head. I go, look, man, this isn't brain surgery, this is melodic hard rock. Let's do it, man. Intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse 2, pre-chorus, guitar solo, bridge, out, we're done.
Yeah.
It's really easy. So, but the sounds, what you're able to get for guitar sounds and drum sounds with the Slate plugins. Steven Slate's a good friend of mine. I use all of his stuff, and it's just a really great time. And I encourage, man. I have a couple young guitar students, and I've encouraged them all. I tell them all one of the most important things you can do is learn how to record and produce yourself, because if you can control your own music and how it sounds, and why to get a snare drum to crack, how to get that guitar sound that you want, you're gonna have all the power in the world.
Def Leppard, tell me how you got hooked up with these guys. You've played with them now for about 7-8 years, doing fill-ins for Steve and Vivian, thank you. I'm like, who's the other guy? Thank you, Vivian.
Well, I'm sort of, yeah. I mean, ultimately, when I'm playing Vivian's playing mostly Steve Clark's parts. So technically, I'm playing Steve Clark's parts. So yeah, I'll take that.
But so how did you get hooked up with those guys and start, doing fill-ins and playing with them here and there through the years?
Well, that dates back to 1987, 88 when I first met Def Leppard on the Hysteria tour. And a friendship that has lasted, for well over 30 years. Phil Collin and I, Phil's like my older brother and my godfather, and Joe and Sav and Rick and Vivian. I've known those guys for more than half my life. So when Trixter started getting, we're going to go to fast forward 1988, when Trixter started getting traction, we got this management company, this guy Ken Mako, and he was really good friends with Peter Mensch, who was Def Leppard's manager at the time. And so Peter was going to help Ken and help Trixter. He liked us. He loved the enthusiasm. He thought we were cool. We were like we reminded Peter of Def Leppard when he discovered them. So the first order of business, introduced us to the Def Leppard guys, and Phil Collin and I hit it off. And it's a friendship that's lasted for well over 30 years. So that's how that all came about. So in 2013, when Vivian got sick, Phil told the guys, we got to call Steve. He's the guy. And the most important reason, the reason why I got the Def Leppard gig was not so much for the guitar playing, is because I'm also a lead singer. And I could sing all the Mutt Lange parts, all the high parts that Vivian has to cover with Def Leppard. Because the one thing that people think they know, but they don't know. Def Leppard there's no pre-recorded vocal parts. All their background vocals are 100% live, along with the lead vocals. And I know a lot of people don't believe that, but it's 100% the truth. Trust me, because I know a lot of bands who stuff's on tape and whatnot. Def Leppard 100% live, and they take it tremendously seriously. Joe Elliott, before the first gig I ever did with them in 2014, he said to me, Steve, I don't give a shit what you do on the guitar. Just make sure you're there to get all those vocal parts. And it's been one of those things that's 7 years. I'm always in the bullpen. I'm always on call for them and always there. They're like family to me, and those guys in their management and the organization has treated me with the utmost respect, and I love them with all my heart, and it's an honor to play with them, And then in 2018, I covered from 2013. I was covering for Vivian Campbell because he got diagnosed with cancer. And then 2018, out of the blue, with 24 hours notice, I had to fill in for my friend Phil Collin because he had a family emergency, and I had to shift everything over to the other side of my brain to learn the other guitar players' parts and vocal parts, equally as important, and be able to put on a rock show and not look like a fill-in. And that's been my job. And again, I'm just so thankful to those guys for letting me in. And the greatest thing about Def Leppard, first, those guys still share the same dressing room. There's no separate dressing rooms. And the other thing is they treated me like I was a full-time member of the band. I didn't have to ride on the crew bus. I traveled on the band bus. I traveled in the band Learjet. I traveled in the band limos. It's not like, and I've been on tour with some of these other bands with other members of the band. They don't get treated like, let's say the main guys. So they're, oh no, you're going to be in the crew bus. Not with Def Leppard, man. They treated me 100%. I stayed at the Ritz-Carltons and the Four Seasons hotels just like they did.
Oh, that's great. And it's so cool because, like you say, there's so many bands today who can't stand to be in the same room with each other, and those guys are still a solid unit.
It is. It is.
Another band you've been involved with for the last couple of years is Eric Martin from Mr. Big. Tell me about these shows. I've looked through the set list through the years. I've been trying to see him live. I've seen him with Mr. Big, but I haven't caught him solo. But to me, I mean, it almost seems like a half Mr. Big, half Trixter kind of show, and band-wise as well. Tell me about working with him.
Well, Eric is a dear friend. Eric is somebody we've known since, the Trixter days. And the funny story is we were such Mr. Big fans, and my singer Pete, especially in Trixter, he idolized Eric Martin. He thought he was his favorite singer. So when, Lean Into It came out, I kid you not, we listened to that record every night for 5 months on the tour bus. It was like before the show, after the show. I think, we knew that record better than the Mr. Big guys did, the songs. So Eric came out. We met Eric at one of the shows when we were on tour with Warrant and Firehouse at the summer in 1991, and we just hit it off. Eric, even though he's a West Coast guy, he was born in Long Island. He's like an East Coast guy. Like I always like to say, he's one of us. Like the Danger guys, Bruno and Steve and Ted, they're one of us, Eric is so much like PJ and I and Joey Casada, who's our drummer, who was the drummer in the band ZO2, who toured with Kiss. They never really hit it big, but they were a great, New York band. So we have this great band with Eric, and again, we do like an Eric Martin, Trixter, Mr. Big Greatest Hits show. And it's just awesome. It's kind of like one-stop shopping because, Mr. Big doesn't work that much and Trixter doesn't work that much. So we were like, hell, man, let's go. Eric invited us. He needed a band to go to Japan with him in 2016 or 2017? I don't know. But he called us up and said, you guys into doing this? He talks like that. And we were like, sure, man. And we just hit it off, and we get along so good, and we have so much fun together. And musically and vocally, it just sounds incredible. So we were like, let's keep this going. And we're looking forward. We were supposed to have a lot of gigs in 20, but sadly, that's not going to happen. But we love playing with Eric, and, we kind of do our own take of the Mr. Big things because, I don't play like Paul Gilbert and PJ doesn't play like Billy Sheehan, but we do a nod to their great work and we kind of make it our own, which is the cool thing.
That's got to be interesting on its own. I mean, because Paul is just like so next level. So, I mean, I can just imagine the homework you had to do to be able to, even if you're not copying note for note, just to be able to, do the stuff justice, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is, of course. And Paul is a huge, Paul's kind of an influence on me in a weird way because being such a fan, I was a fan of Ray X, and back in the day when Paul came out, he was like the next Yngwie Malmsteen. Just when you thought guitar couldn't go to another level, here comes Paul Gilbert, and it was like mind-blowing and just such a sweet guy. I love Paul. He's always been so great to me and the guys. And so, yeah, it was. But, look, man, the one thing I learned really early on was, and Eddie Van Halen taught me this, and Steve Vai, too. When Steve Vai took over with David Lee Roth on the Eat 'Em and Smile thing, the one thing I always dug about Steve Vai was when he did the Van Halen songs, he did them his own way. He did all the right things, but he didn't try to be Eddie Van Halen. So I've never tried to be anybody. So even with Def Leppard, or even I play with Dennis DeYoung from Styx, even when I play, whoever I play with, I kind of take the solos that I need to play and I do them my own way. So if you watch me playing Photograph by Def Leppard, I'm doing solo pretty much 98%, but I'm able to throw my own 2 cents in there and my style because, like, say the end fast lick in Photograph, I don't play like that. So I could never play that lick to make it sound right. I did my own fast lick, and that's kind of what I did, whether I'm playing the Mr. Big stuff. I play it my own way. I do Steve Brown shred. I don't try to copy what Paul Gilbert does, or like even when I play Van Halen songs in cover bands, never tried to copy Eddie Van Halen stuff note for note. I did all the things to where if you heard it, it sounds like the song, but the licks are my licks, and it makes it sound that much more fluid and soulful. And that's my opinion, and it seems to work. And that's what I did with Def Leppard. I did the same thing with Dennis DeYoung. DeYoung said, just do what is there, but put your own stamp on it. And that's what I did.
That's great. What a great thing to say, too, for Dennis, just to say, just get it as close as you can, right? Because obviously there's some bands who be like, if you're missing a note, like, the fans are not going to be happy. But I mean, if you can get it as close as you can, great.
Exactly. And it's all about, again, it comes down to, look, if you're playing the solo to Don't Stop Believin' by Journey, there's really not much leeway there. That is an iconic solo. That's all based on melody. But if the solo has some, let's say, some shred parts in it, whether you're doing, the Eddie Van Halen sort of the way he would do certain pentatonic, there are some slips and slides and different things you can do to where I can make it sound like Eddie, but it's all me. And to me, it sounds that much more fluid and soulful. And it's got your own thing on it. Look, man, the internet is filled with the Van Halen clones and these guys who try to play these solos note for note. And it just sounds stiff and it sounds horrible to me most of the time. I'd rather see somebody like what Steve Vai did when he would do the Van Halen songs. He did it his own way. And look, man, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, been playing guitar for 40 years now. I can pretty much hold my own with anybody, as far as you put me on stage with Paul Gilbert, with Eddie Van Halen, with Phil Collin, I can hold my own. You know what I mean? I've been on tour with Journey, jammed with these guys. I know what I'm doing. So that's the cool thing. I at least have that confidence level that what I do and most of all, I would never ruin a great solo with what I'm doing. I at least know, and I have that much care. I care about somebody's music to where I'm going to put in something. If I'm going to change it a little bit, it's going to be something that sounds as good or maybe even a little bit better.
Right. That's very true. And it's a very good way to put it as well. All right. So Tokyo Motor Fist, the new record, your second album you guys have, Lions. First of all, tell me about the creation of this. You sort of alluded to it earlier, where this is a proper band, something. So were you guys asked to do this, or did this just happen organically, where you just called up Ted and, the other guys and said, let's do this? How does the band come together?
And Tokyo Motor Fist came together strictly from Frontiers Records. My good friend Serafino, who owns Frontiers, he came to me with the idea, and it was, I think, a knee-jerk reaction because Frontiers had the band The Defiance, which was my good Bruno Ravel, Paul Lane, the great guitar player, Rob Marcello, and pretty much a Danger offshoot. So they were looking at, hey, let's get Steve and Ted together. They grew up together. They've known each other for almost 40 years, the history, the New Jersey thing. And so they came to me with it, and it was a no-brainer. And I was totally into it. And they said, well, who are you going to get for drums and bass? And I said, Chuck Berge, because Chuck Berge's another New Jersey guy. I've known Chuck since I was a little kid when he was in Rainbow. And Greg Smith is another guy. He's a Long Island guy, but we all have that same sort of East Coast, Jersey, New York, tri-state area. We have the wacky sense of humor, and we have the same musical vision. We get along great. We have a great work ethic together, and the proof is in the pudding, man. We've made 2 phenomenal records, and I'm just so proud of the band because, again, it is a real band that plays live, and we rehearse together, and we make records together, and we love being with each other. And it shows in the music.
That's so cool. Well, I know, like Greg and Chuck, for example, they've got their own history. I know they played in Red Dawn, and I don't know if they've been in other bands.
They were also, Chuck and Greg were in Rainbow together. They were in the 1995 version of Rainbow with Doogie White singing.
Ah, Chuck, okay. So I know Greg was in that. I didn't know Chuck was in that as well. Okay. This band, so when you guys are recording, tell me about the recording process, because obviously you've got 4 guys who all have, established careers. Do you guys sit down and spend time, like, writing out the songs and all the rest of it?
No, pretty much I do everything. Tokyo Motor Fist is my brainchild. I'm the visionary. I'm the songwriter. I'm the manager. I'm the producer, the engineer, the art director. That's just kind of the way it works. I'm not really good in democratic situations, where everybody has sort of a say. Trixter wasn't that way. Though the other guys, in the band always have a say, I'm always the leader. And that's just the way it works with me, and hence the title of the record, Lions, because I certainly am a lion. My joke is, though I'm a part-time Def Leppard. I'm a full-time Lion in life. But so yeah, no, actually what happens, brother, is, I'm always working in the studio. I'm always writing. I do, produce other bands. I do stuff for film and TV. I'm always writing, always. This is what I love to do. As much as I love to play live, Mutt Lange is like one of my biggest influences ever. And it's all about being that great songwriter, producer. I'm writing for other people, trying to get songs cut or whatnot. So what happens with Tokyo Motor Fist, and pretty much the last 2 Trixter records that were on Frontiers, I basically make a solo record because I don't do demos. Like, I record really finished versions of the songs. I program the drums. I play bass, play keyboards. I sing everything, sing all the backgrounds, play all the parts. And I send it to the guys. I come up, once I feel like I have 10 or 11 songs, I send everybody the material and say, here's the record, and I want you guys to take these songs, put your own stamp on it, and take these songs to the next level. So when I say I program the drums, I don't go crazy, do programming every fill. I do basic, so everybody gets a really good idea, but I don't like kind of leaving anything to chance. And that's for my own self, for being a producer, and I think you might know this, I just can't put anything out there that doesn't sound like a finished product. I just can't. I have to have it sound really, really good, because if it doesn't sound good to me, I don't think it's going to sound good to other people. So that's the way I do things, and it's kind of the way I've been doing things. Going back to the Here record, again, I sang all those songs, and our demos for the Here record are pretty much what you hear on the, on the finished product, only the production level was up 1,000%. But what makes it a band effort is everybody's individuality. So Ted comes in, he puts his vocal spin on it. He doesn't sing like I do. So whatever he does, he makes it his own and changes some things to make it work better for his voice. Greg, the same thing with the bass parts. And then one cool thing on this record, and I always allow this, if anybody has a song, anybody has something they want to do, bring it to me. Let's look at it. Chuck Berge gave me a song that he wrote, I'm going to say 38 years ago in the early 80s. It's the last song on the record, Winner Takes All. He gave me this demo. He said, I want you to listen to it. I played it. It was so 80s, like keyboards and he had his wife singing on it. It sounded like a Pat Benatar song. But I listened to it. I said, this has something. And I completely changed it, came up with a new arrangement. I added the drop D sort of Van Halen, Fair Warning, Unchained, the EVH drop tuning thing to heavy it up. So that's the only song on the record that I didn't write, and that Ted also came in and changed some of the melody on it, and he gets a writing credit on the record. But for all intent and purposes, that's how I make records, and it's just the way I do things, and it saves the guesswork, where there's no gray area when it comes to working with me. I like to have everything. Here it is. You take this track, you add your own personality to it, and this is what's going to make it a band effort, and what's going to make it the sound of Tokyo Motor Fist, and that's what we have.
That's very cool. And I know obviously COVID has thrown a wrench in everything, but you guys have played live. Tell me about that. Do you guys take elements, do you play a Trixter song, a Rainbow song, or whatever? Do you kind of take little elements during the set, as well as just playing Tokyo Motor Fist? Yeah?
Yeah, no, man. We do, we certainly celebrate our histories and the bands we've been in. So with Tokyo Motor Fist Live, we just got, we're up to our 7th gig right now, which is really, really cool. I mean, we had a lot more on the books. We were supposed to go to Japan in November, so now that's postponed until 2021. How cool is that? Tokyo Motor Fist live in Tokyo. Coolest thing ever. It said, hey,
great.
You know what? Sounds like a live record to me.
Tokyo Motor Fist in Tokyo. Yeah, there you go.
Live in Tokyo, man. The Tokyo tapes. Oh, the Scorpions did that already. So, yeah, no, the live show is so much fun, man. It's a total party. We do the Tokyo Motor Fist songs. The last record, we had phenomenal response to a lot of great songs that translate live. And then what we do is we do 2 Danger songs. We've been doing Monkey Business and Bang Bang and Trixter. We do Give It To Me Good and 1 in a Million, which I sing, which is a lot of fun singing and playing guitar on those. And then we have Greg Smith sings Street of Dreams by Rainbow because, of course, Chuck is the drummer on that. So we do that. And then we do a really cool live version of that, which is great. And then Greg Smith sings Just What the Doctor Ordered by Ted Nugent. So it's it's a real cool thing because it's like, look, I'm not going to kid myself or kid anybody else. When you go to see a new band that you don't know, we only had 1 album's worth of material. So we had to do some other stuff to fill up an hour and a half set, but it just really goes over great because it's like the fans love the Tokyo Motor Fist stuff, but they also love to see and hear the Trixter, Danger, Rainbow, Ted Nugent stuff done with a different take on it. Because, of course, we do pretty much the versions, but no matter what, it's different people playing it. So it sounds different. And again, it's just a different energy that we put into it.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, when all this, calms down and gigs can start happening again, hopefully you guys will hit somewhere near Detroit. I would love to catch you guys play.
Yeah, man, we're definitely, I have a lot of guys in the area. We do the Token Lounge, which I think is in Westland, Michigan. Yeah, we do. It's funny that you didn't come because 2 years ago we played there with Eric Martin. So I'm surprised you missed that gig.
I think you know what? Yeah, because that was a show I really wanted to catch as well, and for whatever reason it just didn't work. I've had work or who knows what was going on that night. But no, I remember because that was one of the gigs I was kicking myself for. I was like, no, I can't make this,
So, yeah, that's it, brother, man. The live show is a lot of fun. In February, we did the Monsters of Rock cruise, and we played Dance on 10th Street, which is definitely one of my favorite songs on the new. It's a total nod to Van Halen. I pretty much, nailed the one tone and the guitar solo especially. I used my EVH 50 amp and the Phase 90 pedal that Ed gave me and my EVH gang. So total nod and a total praise for Van Halen on that song. So that new song went over great.
It is, yeah. It's funny. I've heard the record a couple times. I just have it as one solid file, so I don't know I forget what anything's called. But it's absolutely fantastic, and it's very much just a continuation of the first. So it's like if you love that, the second one gives you just as much. It might even be heavier. I don't know. What do you think between the two of them?
Well, I think to do with the production. The record was mixed by Bruno Ravel and myself. Bruno is a great producer, engineer. I do write, sings, play. He's phenomenal. Knew when I finished the record, I had to take it up another level. So I brought Bruno in and he mixed. So I would go over, bring coffee, we would mix. And I think it's the production makes it sound heavier. And then the other cool thing, I don't know if you know this, but Dennis DeYoung plays the keyboard solo on the title track, Lions.
Oh, that's so cool. No, I didn't. That's fantastic.
Yeah, you got to check that out. And what's cool about that for all the gearheads out there, so I went to Dennis's house. He lives outside of Chicago. I went to Dennis's house in December to cut the track. He recorded the solo for Lions on his original Oberheim 8, his original OB8 keyboard that he used in the late 70s and early 80s with sticks. And it was that original keyboard that he just had serviced. And this was the coolest part, was when I went over to it, it still had like masking tape on it with all of his presets from the Styx days. So he's like, here, you want to hear the beginning of Too Much Time on My Hands? He hits the preset. There's the sound. It's fucking recorded in mono. There's no bullshit. And that's the same keyboard that Eddie recorded Jump on. It's the most classic, iconic keyboard from the late 70s and early 80s that anything you ever heard. But it was so cool. Dennis was like, yeah, you want to hear the solo to Fooling Yourself? The exact sound? Boom. He hits a button. There's the sound. It's unreal.
That's the coolest thing.
Yeah, it was great. Listen, we talked about gear. We all know how great the plugins are and how great software is and stuff, and especially with synths. I have a bunch of them, the soft synths. I used a ton of it on the record. And that's the other cool thing about Lions. I also played all the keyboards on the record except for the song that, except for the solo that Dennis played. But this was kind of like my 1984 5150 OU812 vibe that I was in, because I love playing keyboards. I love building soundscapes. So it was really cool. But there's nothing like when you can get the real thing. So having Dennis do the solo on the real Oberheim 8, because like I told you, dude, we just recorded it mono. It goes right out, mono out, and plug it in. I plugged it into my Pro Tools, my portable Pro Tools rig at his house, and there it was. And that's pretty much what you hear on the record. There's not much bullshit else going on. And it's so fucking cool.
It is. Oh, that's amazing. And it really is cool. I mean, you can't beat plugging into the actual thing or having the actual thing being played on your record, like going into the room with the drum kit or something in the room where Van Halen did their first record, or, anything like that, right? You kind of get that exact thing, and it's like, whoa, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, dude, listen, from a guy, man, I was at 5150 at Ed's house. I played his real Frankenstein through the Marshall there. And, man, it's the greatest sound in the world, but we all can't take that home with us. So you got to use technology for what it is. But again, yeah, there's nothing like the real thing. And again, just like what you said, there's nothing like being at, Sunset Sound with Alex Van Halen's drum set that he had, and especially his snare drum, and hitting that snare drum. You're never going to get that sound from a sample. As much as I love the Slate plugins, again, there's nothing like the real thing. But, hey, man, I'm a big believer in letting technology work for you and not letting it work against you.
Exactly. That shows you what a gear nut and what a Van Halen fan you are, that it was Sunset Sound. For the first Van Halen.
Totally, brother. Right now, Brandon, I'm reading Ted Templeman's book, which my good friend Greg Renoff read. So I'm all about, Sunset Sound, Amigo, which was something I didn't even know that they recorded the original demos for Van Halen 1. They did at Amigo recording studios.
So that would have been like She's the Woman, right?
Yeah, that's where they did that, 20 song thing. They went in live and recorded all those songs, and that's the same thing that Skid Row, probably the version of Walk with a Stranger that you heard, is they went into House of Music in New Jersey, House of Music Recording Studios, which is a classic 80s recording studio. They went in and recorded all their material live, and that's the version of Walk with a Stranger that I used to reference for recording the Trixter version, and probably the same version that you heard online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called the Basement Tapes or something online for that. Yeah, I wish those masters would pop up somewhere and someone would properly release them. I know they're raw, but there's just so many great songs in that.
Oh man, there's another one. Did you hear that song "Dirty Lovin'"?
Yeah. Oh, great tune, great song.
Yep. I actually texted Rachel probably about. Maybe it was 2014 when we were doing Human Era, the second Trixter record, and I'm like, dude, do you have a good version of Dirty Lovin'? Because I love that song. I like that song even better than Walk with a Stranger. So I was like, dude, do you have? And he's like, nope, just what you have is they never did any real good versions of those songs. But I don't know, did you ever hear the demos that they did with Matt Fallon?
Yeah, they did that at Bon Jovi's studio in '86, right?
Yes, they did some better versions, like proper demos that Matt Fallon sang, but they never recorded those other songs that way.
Yeah, because on that demo, there was Walk with a Stranger, but it's still the same song, but it's different enough. The one with Sebastian was just, you could tell 2 years had really polished up that tune and made it much stronger. And then another one, I think it was called Rescue Me or something.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, that's a good tune. Yeah.
Fuck yeah, Rescue Me. Fuck, they had a lot of them, man. It was crazy. And again, you know what? The Skid Row record, it's incredible to me that why the song Forever never made it. I mean, I get it, but and Sebastian's been playing it live, but I was like, man, that song was on the original record. I think they would have sold more, and if it was released as a single, it would have been a huge hit, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, especially that time, because lyrically, I think part of it was because it's so similar to I Remember You lyrically, that they probably went, we've got the same, even though it's a totally different song, they probably felt that. Because the same thing, driving on the radio, and it's all kind of that sort of same vibe, right?
Yeah. You're right.
All right, Steve. Well, I know we've gone way over time. I want to thank you so much for, hanging out, doing the interview. This was a lot of fun. Got to cover a lot of ground, and I'm sure stuff you probably don't get to usually talk about. So
it was awesome, bro. Again, like I told you, dude, I always love talking to guys that I know are in the audio end and business. You're cool, dude. So again, keep in touch. Any questions you ever have, let me know. We'll definitely talk.
Sounds fantastic. That would be awesome. That would be great.
Cool, man. All right. Got to roll. I'll talk to you. Bye.
All right, Steve. Yep. Take it easy.
I